And then disability as a demographic group has one of the lowest unemployment or lowest employment rates of all demographics and minority demographics.
Hello there. This is John Bernatovich, your host of the HR Like a Boss podcast. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend. I've embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals, and I'm trying to understand what it takes to do HR like a boss. On today's show, I'm excited to have Jared Daly. Jared is the incoming president at Cleveland SHRM, and that's how I met him. He's got huge shoes to fill because I know George Sample is listening to today's podcast. I cannot be more excited, Jared, to have you on the show. Welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
I'll start off on my first question for all guests, Jared, is to get a sense as to how you see the purpose of human resources.
In a tougher question, I feel like now, when we used to be more in that technical area, the recruiting and the onboarding, and now I just feel, HR professionals have to wear a lot of different hats in that, therapists and culture creators. And so I think for me, the role of HR is really helping support the organization from that talent perspective. So not only finding the quality talent, but in a more competitive labor force, helping create that work culture that keeps people staying, right? So everyone's, jumping jobs and quitting. So I see HR in a big role of making sure they're creating an environment and bringing in the team members that add to the culture, as well as fit in the culture, that keep the business humming and the people happy, and keep them from looking to go elsewhere, right?
Yeah, and the work you're doing, I'm assuming at Cuyahoga County, you've probably seen a lot of organizations that are bringing in that inclusive mindset to drive in a diverse set of candidates. In your particular case, those that have disabilities, and I'm curious about if you're seeing any trends within those clients that are impacting their business or ultimately the job you're doing within your role.
Yeah, I mean, COVID's been difficult for a lot of people and a lot of groups, and I think it also has brought a lot of opportunities. So as the labor force kind of shrunk from the typical populations that businesses look from, they're expanding their idea of who can be employees at their organization, who can be productive. And I think disability was a category that wasn't always on the top of people's minds, and is some kind of a trend and innovative way for people to expand that pool they're looking in for. So Cleveland, if you don't know, is the #1 city in America in percentage of people with disabilities. So we have a really large population of individuals with disabilities. And then disability as a demographic group has one of the lowest unemployment or lowest employment rates of all demographics and minority demographics. So you have this huge population here in Cleveland, and not a lot of them are working. So there's this giant untapped workforce that we kind of talk to businesses about where, hey, you're not getting any candidates. You're getting 1 or 2 applicants now. Have you thought about opening your positions up to people with disabilities? And that could draw in some candidates that you weren't thinking about in the past and give you a chance to fill some of these roles that you're having challenges with. So that trend of people opening their mind of who could work here, who do I want to work here, and how do I find them, has been really positive for at least our organization and people with disabilities in general. And I would argue the business community in Cleveland, right, adding talent in diverse aspects to their workforce is helpful as well.
Tell me about how important it is for HR to balance that compliance that they're really see as a forefront of what they do while being flexible as our business climate is changing.
Yeah, well, I'm biased with this question. I'm to anybody from my HR department watching, probably rolling their eyes. I'm a rule breaker. I'm like FBI's top most wanted of gonna get in trouble or get the county board out there. So, and maybe more from the government lens, because we have to be a little bit more conservative and risk averse. And I try to push some things. So I prefer that HR balance that's a little bit more flexible, and kind of only, lays the heavy hand in extreme things, health and safety, harassment, those, kind of third rails that we don't want to touch. But in the day-to-day operations of work, to give people the freedom and flexibility. And John, I think we just read that Radical Candor book together about really caring personally about individuals. And that to me was the foundation. It also talked about, criticizing directly and being straightforward with some of that. But I think the foundation, or what I took, was that like it only works if you care very personally and deeply about people as humans, and that human is the first word in human resources. So I fall on that side. I think if people know that you care for them, you may not have to come with the strict, heavy-handed rules. You can have that relationship and go, you gotta, this is where we're drawing the line. I appreciate you trying to push the mission or be a little bit cutting edge, but here's where we're running into that risk and that compliance section.
The book is HR Like a Boss. The podcast is HR Like a Boss. I always get my guests out of the show on this last question of how would you describe someone that does HR Like a Boss?
Yeah. And that question prior is like the perfect segue to this, because to me, someone that HR is like a boss is someone that balances that perfectly. And so, although I can't promote the businesses out, I work with just a couple HR partners and the people that we support with disabilities. Sometimes we have HR partners that do too much. They give too much leeway because they have a disability, or they don't want to discipline or write up or even terminate. And so just a couple of the HR partners that I work with that are loving and caring of all of their employees, including the ones that we refer and recommend, but also strict and hold people accountable in equitable ways, right? So they work with our candidates and help them out. And I've talked to some of them that given people rides home when their transportation doesn't show up, but they also, the second they do something wrong, call me in and we write them up and have them sign that paper like anybody else would. So being able to perfectly balance that idea of, I really care about you a lot as a person and I want you to be successful, but when you're doing something out of line, I'm going to call you out. And it's not because I want to, it's because I care about you so much and I want you to work here and I want you to be successful. People that can balance that, and it's not easy. With that book basically stressed how hard it is to always do that, to thread that needle of, I'm going to be direct and hard on you, but it's coming out of a place of love and compassion. If you can pull that off, you'll be HR like a boss for sure. And it's not easy. And that's kind of where I see people out there in the community doing it really well, being supportive, being compassionate, but holding people account is impressive to me. And I'm always amazed by it. It's always been a pleasure working and interacting with you, and appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for checking out the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please consider leaving a rating and review. And better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.